Hey guys. We are moving on from Civil War key figures to secession and the start of the Civil War. Secession, this is when the states decided to leave the Union. Most of this happened around the time of Lincoln's election. So, let's talk about that. Lincoln's election led to the secession of 7 states in the Deep South. So, I'll show you a map here soon. Deep South, very bottom of the United States. But this didn't actually start the Civil War. It didn't start as soon as the state started to leave. Um, Two things happened first. So they had one more attempt to reconcile the North and South. Like, please, 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 don't leave. It'll be fine. Let's work things out. Um, and then the North had to use its military to protect the Union, which we'll get to. So here's the map. Um, Deep South is these states, very bottom of the United States. Um, This is like just the South. These eventually get seen as border states. Border states meaning it's kind of an iffy. We want to be in the Union, but we also want slavery. But then, like, maybe we should join the Confederates, but but we want to stay in the Union. Um, just think of this part of the United States as like an ombre, kind of like an ombre painting. Up here, you have free states, no slavery allowed. Here, these border states, you have like we want to be in the Union, but like we want to have slaves. They're on the border. They're iffy. Um, these just southern states. Typically, if you were there and you were a slave, I mean, life was still obviously hard, but it wasn't the worst. Um, Down here, you get to the deep south. This is where the most dangerous plantations were for the most part. The most racism, just the worst lives for slaves. So again, an ombre goes down like an arrow. The first state to secede was South Carolina. So again, just another map. South Carolina, then we jump over to Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, Texas. Just deep states, deep South states. Okay, what is the United States? So the Southern decision to secede was based on old arguments. Some of these old arguments were the United States was a compact between states, not a national government like above the states. So they thought that the United States was just an agreement by all of the states, like, we're just going to work together. We're not a huge country. The government is not above us all. They're just there to facilitate this strong friendship between the states, and we're good. Um, if it's that way, that it's just a bond, states can leave the Union freely and peacefully. The rights of the states have the right to decide what they want to do. That should be protected as a guarantee of liberty. We all have the rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They took this states' rights as that kind of same level of necessity. So, February 4th, 1861, the Confederate States of America were formed. The CSA Constitution, very similar to the United States Constitution, with 4 major changes. So, protected states' rights to the Union and to like the United States as viewed today. We are one country. Each of the states is just a region of the country, but we are under this umbrella of our Constitution, of our government, that kind of thing. The states do have rights to make their own decisions. Like Donald Trump was saying the other day, that it is up to each of the states when they want to reopen because of the coronavirus, when they want to bring school back, reopen restaurants and gyms and all of the things. So we still clearly have those states' rights, but to the Confederate States of America, it was more of a this is how it is. The government is just there to like help us out kind of thing. Number 2, it guaranteed slavery, that it was okay. Their constitution referenced God. It was full of religious wordings. We have the separation of church and state. Our constitution isn't like a religious document, but theirs was. And it prohibited protective tariffs. So it got rid of these like tariffs or taxes on trade. So it got rid of those. Okay, so Missouri and Kentucky did join, but they were never fully controlled. Also, this New Mexico territory. But really, the states we're going to focus on are these, not so much out in the West. Um, the West wasn't all the way settled. There was still some, like a lot of Native Americans that lived out there. Manifest Destiny was going on, but it was, our country is huge. So while the Civil War was going on, it was mainly in like this half of the United States. Over here, they were still trying to settle, move west, conflicts with Native Americans, that kind of thing. But the entire United States was involved. It was just more the fighting was like over here in this part of the United States. Okay, so um, moderate Republicans. Remember, Republicans kind of came to light in this era. Lincoln was the first Republican president. They proposed a Crittenden Compromise. This is just a way to like try and bring the South back in. They wanted to extend the Missouri Compromise line to the Pacific. So remember the 3630 right here, Missouri Compromise. They wanted to extend that out to the Pacific. So anything under the 3630, this Missouri Compromise was okay for slaves. Anything above it was not. They even proposed a full constitutional amendment to protect slavery. Like the 13th Amendment abolishes slavery, but the North was willing to concede and say, "Ooh, sorry, listen, we'll even protect slavery for you. Just stay in the Union, please." But both Lincoln and Davis didn't agree to these full terms that were proposed by these Republicans in Congress. So they had two options. Either they allow for peaceful separation, we split into two countries, or we fight to preserve the Union. The South rejected this offer of, hey, listen, come back in, because they wanted to create their own union. So April 1861 starts the Battle of Fort Sumner. This is referred to as the beginning of the Civil War. They didn't come at it with the point of it being a battle; it just kind of happened. We'll talk a lot more about it. But so the North had some pretty big advantages. If you just look at the like materials and stuff, clearly the North should have won just by what they have. Um, they had a larger population. They were much more industrial. They had railroads. If you look at the North, it's a lot of like factories, industry, that kind of thing. The South was more up the agricultural side of the United States. Um, the problems for the North is they had to invade the South to win. So they were fighting away from their center, away from the things they needed. And it was really difficult to maintain enthusiasm and support for the war. At one point, Lincoln had to like draft people in. People don't like to be forced to go to war. It really causes problems, but they needed more men to go and fight. So here's just a graph. Um, Blue is the North, yellow is the South. You can clearly see in all of these things, the North has way more resources. So for the South, they were outnumbered and less industrial, but President Davis knew they didn't have to win the war, they just had to outlast the North. So if they could just maintain, that the North would eventually give up and they would win, technically. They had better military leaders. Um, their military was very strong. Like I talked about earlier, Robert E. Lee, one of the greatest military minds the United States had, lived in Virginia. He fought for the South. He was one of the guys that came to put down John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry. Um, like I said, he stayed with the South. England and France also were a little bit more willing to help the South. Since the South had cotton and tobacco, they could trade with England and France. And so they became pretty close allies. So they really leaned on England and France for support. Um, England and France had both gotten rid of their slavery, and their support wasn't all war long, but it seemed to be on the south side. So the first main strategy of the war was that for the South, they were offensive. Drag out the war, attack the North strategically, try not to lose as much people and ammo as possible, but do strategic attacks and make the war drag out. So, well, the one thing we have is the Anaconda Plan. This is George McClellan. He's a strange guy. I won't talk about him. Ulysses S. Grant, remember Union. Winfield Scott was the guy that came up with this. This is his plan. So let's just create a blockade and squeeze them out. Okay. So this was a northern plan. Since the southern plan was offensive, defensive, just drag it out. The North wanted to get it done quickly. So they wanted to create blockades all around up the rivers and just squeeze them in like an anaconda. If they could squeeze them in, they could cut off the ties to England and France, who were like over here, and not let anything get in, nothing gets out. Eventually, they should give up. Well, it didn't work, but it was a good try. So again, the two political leaders we have Lincoln, Jefferson Davis, the two presidents. Yeah, this will be our last one. So from 1861, 1862, the South used cotton diplomacy to try and get France and England to help them. So they were like, we'll give you discounts on our things if you give us supplies. Napoleon III favored the South, but wanted England to do so first. They were kind of afraid to get involved. Napoleon was from France. So they were like kind of waiting for England to make the first move. So if it blows up in their face, it hurts England and not France. England offered belligerent status to the Confederate States of America, but otherwise chose a hands-off policy. So they were like, okay, we see you, we recognize you, but we're kind of afraid to do anything about it. So we're gonna stay back here. But like, you do you. We see you. Good job. You do you. By 1863, King cotton diplomacy failed because Egyptian and Indian cotton started to fill European demand. So England and France were looking at the United States. Okay, we see you, but we're a little afraid of you. So they started to look at other places, Egyptian and Indian, and they found cotton there. So they didn't have to mess with the United States struggles. And this really hurt the South. We're going to stop here. We'll move on to fighting later. So let me know if you have any questions. For this class, you're going to have a short worksheet of kind of detailing what the Confederate and the Union sides had. That'll be on Classroom. And then you have a 3-question quiz due Friday. So let me know if you have any questions. I'll send you the other half of the notes on Wednesday. So have a great